live on YouTube. Hello, YouTube.
Hi.
Oh dear, what's going on? Failed to connect to stream. No bueno, no bueno.
Maybe we're not live on YouTube.
I'll take back my hello.
Hang on, just give me a second. Stream key, stream key, stream key, stream key, stream key. B. Okay, start. Excellent. And go live. And we are now live on Facebook too. Excellent. Welcome, internets. Welcome to the Hop Edition. We are back.
Who's doing the intro? Please don't ask me to do it.
Tricky's doing it.
Good.
Am I? Okay.
Do you want to do it, Robbie?
Have a go.
Why not?
That's all right. We'll let Tricky do it.
Throw you in the deep end.
Yeah.
Right, let me drag that to there. Click on that one. Right then, we're good to go, Trick. Do you want to count us in, mate? Or do you want me to do that?
You do it. You're much more experienced at doing 1, 2, 3 than me.
Yeah, I can count to 3. Okay, so
we're going to click when you say click, though, right? 1, 2, 3, click.
1, 2, 3, click. It's always 1, 2, 3. You had a go at me when it was 1, 2, 3, and then I expected it. So it's 1, 2, 3, click. Okay, 3, 2, 1, click.
Decide to go 3, 2, 1.
Don't start, Owen.
Anyway, we're all recording, right?
We are all recording.
Oh, is that what the click? Is that what the click was? Right, I'm with you. Yeah, I'm recording. We're all good.
Good.
Oh man. Okay.
No, we're good.
Okay. So we're all happy, ready to go. Hang on, let me just make sure I've got everything here. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to episode 46 of the Hop Edition. Today, we've got a very special guest from Yakima Chief Hops. We've got Robbie Harrigan here to talk to us about who Yakima Chief are, what they do, what products they've got, and all sorts of other stuff related to that. So let's get into it. Okay, so Robbie, do you want to just introduce yourself first of all? Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and get us started with what you're drinking as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, firstly, thanks for having me on. So my name's Robbie Harrigan. I work for Yakima Chief Hops in Europe. My role is business development in the homebrew sector. So I look after our homebrew operation across Europe. So yeah, amazing job. Get to meet lots of amazing people and drink lots of amazing beer. I've worked for Yakima Chief for just over a year. And prior to that, I worked for another hop merchant in the UK, Charles Fareham. So all in all, I've been working in hops for around 6 years. And I've been homebrewing since 2014, so about 8 years. So in terms of beer, I've gone for everyone's favourite. So we've got Daya Software Update Needed, which is a new pale ale from Daya, brewed in conjunction with, if that focuses, ourselves, using a brand new product, which we'll get into later in the podcast. But essentially, it's a pale ale brewed with 100% Simcoe hops and dry hopped with a brand new product. These guys were one of the first breweries in Europe to use it. It's a frozen fresh hop, which has then been converted into a cryo pellet. So pretty wacky stuff. The idea is you're getting the benefits of fresh hops and also cryo hops. So we'll dive into that later, I'm sure. But yeah, it's I've already tried a can previously and it is nuts. So if you do see it at a bottle shop or on draft, I recommend you check it out.
Good. Yeah. So, well, I mean, I don't want to jump the gun here, Robbie, but so is it is effectively a wet hop leaf, but then processed into cryo?
Yeah,
okay.
So many of our partner farms in the US also grow large quantities of fruit, nuts, berries, things like that. This particular farm grow thousands of acres of blueberries. And much like peas, you want to flash freeze those straight out the field and then get them out into the market. Someone asked the question, can we do this with hops? Because if you've ever been fortunate to go over to the Pacific Northwest during hop season, one of the highlights is drinking fresh hopped beers. brewed with fresh American hops, fresh hop Citra, Simcoe, and so on. The idea was if we could flash freeze these hops, we could then offer those hops across the globe. So those products were launched last year. It's a great success. And at the same time, one of our sales guys went, yeah, that's good and all that. Not content with that, went, can we turn them into cryo? Obviously, we'll get into cryo later on, but essentially it's a concentrated lupulin product. So either is that you get a fresh hop, freeze it, and then put it through the cryo process, which then separates the lupulin from the plant material. And this beer is about 2 feet away from me, and it stinks. It's absolutely insane. So you've got just the sort of real fresh, sort of vibrant, bright character, which you get only from fresh hops, with the sort of more rich fruit character of the cryo and the hop itself. So yeah, it's pretty nuts.
So this beer's all Simcoe.
So yeah, Simcoe T19 cryo hot side, I believe, and then we were there. Went down to Daya. They're only about half an hour from where I live, half an hour, 40 minutes. We were there on the day they dry hopped it, and the hops arrived that morning, still frozen solid. Excuse me. And then they went straight into tank within hours. So the hops have been frozen since they were picked, the day they were picked in Yakima, which is to get them to Cheltenham is pretty cool. So yeah, just one of the sort of things we're working on. But yeah, super exciting.
I wonder if Chris would get on better with fresh Simcoe than the normal varieties he's not so keen on.
You're not? Well,
I'm not a big
everybody
fan of
else loves Simcoe on this pod. Don't worry.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've not met many people who don't like Simcoe, but yeah, maybe.
There's always one.
Yeah, I'm sure we can convert. Yeah, I'm sure we can convert. Yeah,
I'm sure we could, given enough time and enough effort.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What are you drinking then, Owen?
I'm drinking my my Dead Pony Club clone off the hand pull. Yeah, nice and clear.
Looks great.
As you can see, it's not very much of it left. Nice bit of lacing. It's a little bit grassy, which is lovely. It's got a decent level of bitterness to it. It's about 4%, so it's just an absolute smasher.
Yep.
Yeah, and I need it after today. It's been a long day in the sun, so
good stuff.
Yeah.
What about you, Trick?
I've also got a beer off of the beer engine hand pull. This is my elderflower golden ale. The elderflower element is an abject failure. Doesn't taste of elderflowers whatsoever. So I tried using some dried elderflowers. I don't know whether the ones I got were just totally naff or whether dried elderflowers generally.
No, I've brewed with dried elderflower and got nothing as well.
Yeah. So bearing in mind it's actually sort of the middle of elderflower season, why I didn't just go and get some actual fresh ones, I don't know. But I may try and do some sort of tincture or infusion and kind of add that to the keg afterwards. But it's still drinking as a fairly decent sort of golden ale, so it's got some EKG and Cascade in there, and it's just a nice light summery beer. So yeah, elderflower not so great, but otherwise it's a decent base beer and quite nice to have something like this on the hand pull at this time of year as well. So
if you ask nicely, Tricky, I reckon Robbie might flash freeze some for you and then put it through the
cryo elderflower. Yeah, let's try it. Let's do it.
Well, there's an idea.
It'd have to come from the Pacific Northwest, though, in America.
Yeah, you might be waiting a couple of weeks. Yeah.
No, that's cool, man.
So, Chris, what's in the massive stein that you've got in front of you there?
Well, Brett Harmon, our friend Brett Harmon, he calls this a diving pool. But this is just a small glass. It is the last, unfortunately. There is no more of it. This is the rest of the A word. Inspired by the N word by Richie Brooks. It is my All Azaka beer. Very much not quite a smash. It's a twash. And it's really nice. It's just a pineapple bomb. I absolutely love this beer. I'm a huge fan of Azaka. I'm a huge fan of most hops, I'll be honest. Not as big a fan of Simcoe or Rawaka, but I do like, my new experimental process of coming up with beers that taste amazing, and this one is an utter banger. So I'll be sticking the recipe for this one on the Patreon, which we've not touched on the recipe section for the hop standers. at the end of this podcast. And speaking of Patreon, if you want to join us on Patreon, it is www.patreon.com/the Hop Edition podcast. There's various levels for you to try, but if you want access to the recipes, read the description and go for it. And I want to say a massive shout out to David Clark, Jay Nelson, Joe Dell as our 3 latest Patreons who signed up this week. Thanks very much for joining us, guys. We're going to have some fun with this one. And I also want to say a huge thank you to our sponsor for the podcast, Brew Keg Tap. If you need anything, fermentation, kegging, anything from Kegland, anything like that, hit up Brew Keg Tap, speak to Johnny, and he'll sort you out. It's an amazing place. And as Andy would say if he was here and not Crook, they do amazing drip trays. So, yeah, Brew Keg Tap, thanks very much for helping us out with this one, guys.
Sweet. What's next?
What is next? So we've all done what we're drinking. So Robbie, would you be able to tell us a little bit more about what Yakima Chief do? What's their sort of, obviously they're a hop company, but how do they work? I believe it's kind of a group of kind of hop growers and stuff that come together to form the company. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are unique in the hop supply world in that we are the only hop company who is 100% owned by hop growers. So we've got 15 hop grower families who form up the ownership. Some of whom have been growing hops for 6 or 7 generations, back into the mid 19th century. So yeah, the idea is that we want to share that knowledge and that experience throughout the globe, form partnerships with the best brewers around the globe, and provide them with the best quality hops. So quite a simple mission statement, I guess, but also one that carries a lot of value. So yeah, it's really nice to be a representative for the growers rather than representing, many layers of sort of distributors or retailers or things like that. We have a direct link back to those family farms over in the Pacific Northwest. And it's a real privilege to represent those guys and introduce their hard work into the market. So and I hope anyone who uses the hops can kind of get a sense of that, get a feel for that. So it's great stuff.
Does that kind of direct to farm sort of relationship sort of have an impact in terms of the hop quality and obviously there must be quite a bit more, I guess, perhaps sort of pride in the product from the producers and stuff when they are essentially running the business?
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing unique to us is we've got what we call our RTG scheme, or our return to grower scheme, where on average between 75 and 80% of our revenues are reinvested onto the farms. So obviously there's a ever-growing demand for the likes of Citra Mosaic. Shows no sign of slowing down. It's not just a case of planting more, because you need to make sure the farm has enough infrastructure to make sure those hops can be picked within their appropriate windows and then dried appropriately and then packaged. Where they're reinvesting in tractors or extra workers or more kilns or more picking machines or more cold storage, all things like that. It helps us grow sort of sustainably and organically, and ensures that the quality of those hops is maintained as well. There's not more hops than we know what to do with, and they're ended up being picked too late or picked too early just because they need to be. We can make sure that those hops are true to type every time. So, and it helps then fund programs like the experimental program. So the experimental program has produced the likes of Citra, Mosaic, Equinox, Sabro, Talus, to name but a few. And that costs a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of investment to make sure those hops are released. So yeah, all goes back, or nearly all of it goes back to those farmers and those growers.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on, Owen.
I'm just keen to understand a bit more about that whole development side of things and how all of that works. Is that predominantly the farms themselves doing that activity, or do they tend to kind of get support elsewhere?
So we have a sister company called Yakima Chief Ranches, which is our farm management company. So that helps us. That looks after the growing and the development of these new varieties. It also helps ensure that the farms themselves are growing hops that are true to type, and the hops themselves are free of viruses, free of disease. They're picked at optimum condition. But yeah, it's the Yakima Chief Ranches side of the business that is responsible for hop development and hop breeding. As part of the wider, it's known as the Hop Breeding Company, of which we're a joint partner in. So if ever you see a hop that says HBC, you might see on the Citra it's HBC 394. HBC is obviously the hop breeding company, and 394 is its initial experimental number. So
just to jump in at that particular point, we're obviously, because we're live on YouTube and on Facebook at the moment, we're getting quite a lot of questions because you're on, Robbie. One from Christian Ibbotson has asked, and it's pertinent to what you just said. Do you have any plans to release HBC 630 into the UK consumer market?
Yeah, for sure. If there's the appropriate demand, absolutely. Yeah, it's one we're quite excited about. It's quite unique. Anyone who's tried it knows it's a bit different. It's got a real kind of candied cherry raspberry thing going on, which isn't too common in hops. You don't see too many hops with those kind of flavors. So
I need some of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I need that because I do a beer called Northern Monkey, which has got Bramlin Cross in it.
Okay, yeah.
I think a mixture of that and Bramlin Cross would really be nice.
Yeah, there's real berry fruit stuff. Yeah, well, let's try and get some out there then. Yeah, absolutely.
That'd be lovely. I'm just going to do a couple more questions whilst we're at this particular point. So, Mersey Beers has asked, do you expect to produce more hop blends like Cryopop? Obviously, talking about the experimental development side of things.
So Cryopop's the first in what we hope will be a series. There's already some in the works, but I'm going to tease you and say I can't actually talk about those at the moment.
Those NDAs suck, don't they?
Yeah. I'm not going to get myself sacked, I'm afraid. But there's all stuff in the works, and it's mainly focused around sort of reverse engineering hop flavor and hop aroma. Finding if you have a beer that's really pineapple-y, what is it that's causing those pineapple flavors and aromas, and how can we get more of that in? Will we look to do a Cryopop pineapple or a Cryopop cherry or whatever it might be? I'll be pretty confident there'll be more of those to come for sure.
That sounds awesome. I'm well down for that. And David Carr has asked a question on Facebook, which I think is really interesting. When you talk about the whole 15 farms and it being a conglomerate almost, is that to protect prices from just large breweries controlling everything? Or is it simply to benefit the actual growers and give them sort of more for what it is that they're doing? Because they're clearly doing a lot of the work.
Yep.
Is it something that they're going to sort of get protection from? I hate to use the term AB InBev, but the big breweries, the big brewery chains. Is it to protect the prices?
I mean, if you go onto our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Yakima Chief, there's a great video actually. I think it's called A Selling Story, which kind of explains the origins of why the company was set up to begin with. And pretty much what you said. There was a chance meeting between one of our original founders and a brewer at a hop merchant's. And the grower saw the price the merchant was charging for some of these hops, and obviously knowing the price they sold those hops to the merchant at, it felt a bit unfair, really. So it's all about, they're the ones who are working super hard to grow these amazing products, the highest quality products. How do you protect that, and how do you ensure that obviously the farmers are getting a fair deal, and also the brewers are getting a fair deal? So that's kind of the very simplified version of why the company was set up, to protect those farms and ensure that they're here for generations to come. There's been a few reckonings across the years. You see it globally around the hop industry, but if we can offer fair and sustainable pricing, then that gives everyone every chance of success, really. So, I encourage you to check out that link. It's a really sort of 5 or 6 minute video that kind of gives a nice little insight into why the company was founded.
So it's kind of just vertically integrated the business model, right? In terms of removing the selling to a distributor or selling to a hop merchant, effectively just in-house that yourselves.
So we have complete control of where these hops go, and in terms of, obviously we do use some distributors across the world because they're a very useful partner to have, maybe where we can't reach directly with a sales member. At the same time, we don't want to see our hops being sold at ludicrous prices, and that money, not go back onto the farms. That's the core of what we do. So everyone has a role to play to a certain extent within the industry. But it's all about us sort of keeping as much control over that and making sure it's fair for everyone involved.
Cool. I've got a question, Robbie, about the fact that you guys trademark or have trademarks on certain hops, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, am I right in saying like Citro and Mosaic trademarked?
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean say that you guys are the only people that are allowed to grow it?
Yeah, absolutely. So those plant material and that sort of intellectual property, but also the genetic property of those plants is trademarked and patented. And again, that's we can then license those out to other farms who will grow those for us. But again, it's to ensure that if you're a brewer who brews a Citra beer year in year out, you want to make sure that Citra is Citra, right? And that your product remains the same. It's all about ensuring. We call it varietal purity. Basically, that hops are a seasonal product, so they are influenced by the weather, the climate, everything like that. But we do everything we can to make sure that Citra is as Citra-esque as it can be year in year out. So that's why you will see those trademarks after many of these varieties. Simcoe, Talus, etc. So.
And I think broadly my experience is you guys do that really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
And Citra is more or less Citra, right? And Mosaic is very much normally Mosaic, although varies slightly in terms of its nuanced characteristics. We often are having conversations around Galaxy. And we've talked a lot about how Galaxy, more recently, I think certainly this season or last season's, seems to have really come back to form. But there was a period of time where it really was it wasn't the hop that it was it was 6 or 7 years ago. And I think actually they may have lost that, as you guys talk about, that varietal purity.
Yeah, and it could be many reasons. I mean, we don't interact with any Australian hops really, so it's hard to say for sure. And it could be what I discussed about previously in terms of, I know demand for Galaxy is always tends to be outstripping supply because it's a very popular variety. Whether there was more than the farms could handle appropriately, it's hard to say, and we wouldn't want to speculate. But it could be that it fell out of its known parameters briefly. But you might see it. So we have what we call proprietary varieties, which are the Citra, Mosaic, Simcoes of this world with their trademarks. Then you've got the public varieties such as your Cascades, Chinooks, Centennials, and you might often find that those are the varieties where you see the largest variance in terms of quality or aroma properties or flavor properties, because they're not grown to a consistent standard, and there's no kind of varietal purity there. They're public varieties, they're not trademarked. You could go online tomorrow and buy a Cascade plant if you wanted to and grow it in your garden. You can't go and buy a Simcoe plant, for example. So you might see that Cascade could be amazing, or it could be maybe a bit underwhelming. And that's because they're not grown within these known varietal parameters. They're generally, everyone does a pretty good job, but you may see more variance in that than something like a Citra or a Simcoe.
Sure, yeah.
So just coming back to that sort of seasonal variation a little bit. So what are the kind of highlights from the season just gone in terms of what's gone really well and what's performed in the 2021 season? And is this too early for sort of any predictions as far as 2022 goes? This is partly from a question on the chat from Christian Ibbotson again, but any sort of forecasts on that front?
Well, going back to 21, if we may, actually shaped up to be quite a worrying season. I don't know if you saw on the news in the Pacific Northwest and certain parts of Canada, they saw these ridiculous heat waves. We're talking mid 50 degrees centigrade, which hops like hot weather, but some of these hops are actually getting just burned because the heat was so voracious and so intense. And what you have is when the hops are in the early phase of their growth, you have what's called burrs, where they just start to sort of bloom out and burr, and those are just getting zapped off essentially by this heat. So we were quite worried that we might see greatly reduced yields or unhealthy plants. But at the same time, hops, anyone who's grown hops knows hops are hard to kill. Hops are hardy things, and actually the crop came in pretty normal, which was really great to see, because we were all a little concerned, as was every grower in America. moving on to this year, yeah, everything's looking pretty normal. We're not seeing anything too out of the ordinary. The Yakima Valley and the Pacific Northwest in general is made up of 3 primary hop growing states. You've got Washington, Idaho, and Oregon. Washington and Idaho tend to be quite dry, more of sort of almost like a desert environment, whereas Oregon's a bit more like the UK, if anything, a bit more temperate, a bit more green, with a bit more rain. But as environments go, it's pretty much a paradise for growing hops. You have lots of hot weather and a really cold winter, and hops like a nice cold winter and a nice hot summer. And you've got all the snow kept up in the mountains, which melts in the spring and then fills the valleys and the watercourses. So, yeah, it's pretty much hop growing paradise. So everything's been on track this year, and we're not expecting anything. We don't want to get too confident too early. There's still, 10, 12 weeks to go until harvest kicks off. So, anything can happen, I guess. But yeah, it's looking good.
Just as obviously as the scientist of the group, so what kind of effect does it tend to have on the oils, the lupulin, the humalones, all the different chemicals that are involved within the hops when you do get a hotter than normal summer, or you get a blast of heat, or I suppose as long as the irrigation's right and the plant survives, theoretically you shouldn't get too much. It's an outdoor organism after all, but is it going to have an effect on the yield? Is it going to have an effect on the particular expression within the plant as far as the oils and stuff go?
Well, yield is definitely something to be mindful of, because I mentioned before, when you have some of these burrs getting literally fried off by 54-degree heat, you're going to have less cones on that plant, and therefore your tonnage in the picking shed is going to be lower. If you have a stress plant, they can sometimes have different expressions of oil makeups and things like that. Fortunately, we didn't see that last year. Obviously, if you've got a plant that's obviously feels heat, it's going to want as much water as possible to kind of to counteract that. So yeah, we do have obviously drip feed irrigation out there, because it is so hot in the summer. It's usually on average sort of mid 30s to 40 degrees for months on at a time. So you do need irrigation. But yeah, you might find that a stressed plant can sometimes throw off different profiles and different oil makeups, which again would then be back into that subject of varietal purity. And you might have a hop that's higher in a certain compound and lower in others, and then obviously it's going to have an impact in the brew house.
Okay.
Have the growers ever found that if they stress a particular hop, that it changes the oil makeup to be a positive thing, and then they're like, actually, if we keep Simcoe pretty dry, it's actually much better? Or
great question. I'm sure stuff like that does get looked at. Every hop is a unique variety, so it has different demands. So I'm sure, there's different water demands per variety and things like that. I'm not sure on those specific trials have been done, but I'd be surprised if something like that hadn't been looked into for sure.
I'm just going to come out and say it. Would there be any possibility, obviously not on air right now, but is there any possibility that you'd be able to put us in touch with one of these growers? Because I would love to have somebody like that on this podcast, purely to talk about things like that. Because as homebrewers, we talk about these things in chat rooms and forums all over the world. It'd be nice to get somebody actually with their finger on the pulse to be able to say, that can happen, that probably doesn't happen. We take steps to make sure that or whatever. That'd be really cool.
I'm sure I could certainly ask the question. Absolutely. Let's see what we can do.
That'd be brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, we've got the grower ownership team as well, but we've got a great, what we call our grower relations team, who kind of are the liaisons between the sales team and the external staff and those grower owners. So, and then we've got the guys who look after the plant breeding and the plant health, and who look after the full lab and nursery side of the operation. So yeah, let me ask some questions. Let's see what we can do.
Thanks, Robbie. Appreciate that.
Chris wants to talk to a botanist, basically.
I mean,
could you arrange that?
I want to talk to somebody who understands these plants.
It might be best if it's just Chris on that podcast.
And no one wants to watch that conversation or hear it, but Chris really wants to have that conversation.
All the hate I get, man. All the hate.
I'm only joking. Anyway, question for the chat.
Yep.
After hops come out of their kind of experimental number,
Mhm.
who gets to decide the name of them? How do you come up with these trademark names?
It's not any of the sales team because they have some shockers, to be honest. Yeah,
Everything would be called Brian if it was me.
yeah, Dave or something like that. Yeah, absolutely. I think a hop called Dave would be great, but I stand by that. But yeah, that's done usually with the grower relations team and the growers. Quite often, the hops are named after sort of local landmarks or local sort of cultural references. If you look at something like talus, that's a native word for a sort of stone formation that's found within the Yakima Valley. Yeah, there's usually a nice link between the hop name and kind of the environment and cultural references, whether it's the maybe the Mexican community who live in that area or the native community. So yeah, as to who makes the decision, I don't know. I know sometimes it takes ages to get it done because you have people who convinced they've got the name, and I think there's some serious deliberation goes on.
It's names by committee, is what you're telling me.
Absolutely, yeah. These things are never easy. So
the horse with 8 legs is an animal designed by committee. Yeah,
absolutely, yeah.
So, Tricky.
Yes.
How's the beer?
It's all right. Yeah.
Excellent. So, come on then. What's actually happening at Yakima Chief at the moment? What have you got that you can tell us about?
So yeah, I hinted at it earlier on, but yeah, we've got. I guess we pride ourselves as a company who are continually innovating, never stand still. We want to be leading the way in hop research and hop products and sort of add real value. So I mentioned what we've got is our frozen Cryohops at the moment, which is when I first heard that was done, I thought that makes how have we done that? That makes no sense. The fact we can just get fresh citra into Europe is amazing enough, but now we can get fresh citra in cryo form shows that we've got a real culture of kind of why not? If someone goes, can we do frozen citra or frozen fresh hop cryo? Someone's going, well, why not? Let's try it. It's the only way to find out these things.
What temperature is the cryo at? What temperature do you freeze it down to? Are we talking liquid nitrogen cryo, or are we talking?
We use liquid nitrogen. Yeah, generally we want to go between -30 and -40, okay. And that ensures that the whole cone is fully frozen and therefore will shatter properly. Especially with the wet hops, it's a bit different when they're dried. When they're dried, they tend to be, between 8 and 11% moisture content. The wet hops are anything up to sort of 80, 85, 90%. So obviously you require a lot more freezing in order to get a proper break apart of that cone. So yeah, liquid nitrogen is used throughout the process actually to keep things cool, but also to eliminate oxygen from that production environment. Because as we know, oxygen is the main enemy of hops, right? So we don't want that anywhere near them, especially when you're talking about such volatile and delicate aroma compounds. Doesn't take a lot of oxygen to really, do some damage to those. So that's one product we're looking at. I believe Chris, you alluded to Cryopop. So the Cryopop original blend has been in the market for about a year in its sort of fully named format. It had a trial period before that. That's sort of some real industry-leading research we're looking at, and we can go into that for sure. When we talk about survivable compounds, and those are compounds that we find most often survive the brewing process and then present themselves in the finished beer. And we worked on putting together a blend that had a maximum concentration of those, so for maximum aroma and flavour. So we identified 7 compounds that commonly present themselves in finished beer and have favourable or pleasant aromas. So we worked backwards, put together this blend. And before anyone asks in the chat, I don't know what's in it. I don't know the blend. That's genuine. It's
NDA.
Is that
like 11 herbs and spices? Yeah.
Yeah, KFC. The KFC recipe.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well,
Absolutely.
with respect, give me an LCM SMS in about 3 days, and I'll tell you what they are.
Radio.
I've been doing my research on that, Robbie, and there's no information in here either.
No, it gives nothing away. There you go. Yeah, there you go.
Here's
Just
what I
rubbish.
made earlier.
So what you can do, actually, I mean, what's quite a fun idea is if you look at that, this is available online, by the way. So if you go onto cryopopblend.com, you can find a full PDF of this really useful document. But you've got what we call the survivables chart here, which shows sort of the makeup of these hop varieties and the ratios of these compounds they contain. If you look where Cryopop Blend sits on that and some of the varieties around it, I'm sure you can maybe take some guesses to what might
Yeah,
be
you can
there.
probably work backwards from there, can't you?
Yeah, but
Ooh. So Mersey Beers has just posted in the chat something that may well be violating an NDA. He read an article that gave a rough breakdown of Cryopop, and it said Idaho 7 was 60 to 70%.
I don't know.
Who knows?
knows?
I think Idaho
It's a
7's
mystery.
quite high up on the list of survivables, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's third or fourth on that list. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Yeah, I mean, it would
Potentially.
make sense, obviously, if you're looking for a
Potentially.
blend that's got the most survivables, it's going to be a mixture of the hops that are at the top of that
Mhm.
chart, sort of thing, isn't it?
quite possibly, yeah.
Essentially.
Quite possibly.
I made a beer last night which had Idaho 7 in it.
Perfect. Yeah, actually, I was saying to the guys before we went live, I was at a brewery earlier today that used Cryopop and Idaho 7, and it was just sublime. It was absolutely ridiculous. Just the amount of hop aroma and flavour in there was, so if you do see some Cryopop, Idaho 7 is definitely one I recommend to tag along with that.
Idaho 7 and Cashmere, mate. In a Pilsner. Beautiful. Love it.
In a Pilsner.
I went Citra and Idaho 7. Any guesses on what beer I made last night?
Nipa.
It may pertain to a certain competition that might be coming up in the end of July.
Oh, of course.
Are you
Would have
entering a
been
beer?
No, I just made.
Oh, got you. I know what it is. Yeah, I'm with you.
I made the Unity recipe.
Oh, right. Excellent.
The mystery beer that's definitely not in the title of the competition.
Not at all.
It's the worst kept secret
In the
by a
history
long
of the
shot.
world.
But no, the fact that we're going to be releasing that kit as a kit with the malt miller, the Unity Conflux recipe. I obviously have that recipe, and so I thought, you know what, I really ought to brew it. So I brewed it last night, and if you're lucky, I might send you a bottle.
I think what we
There you
need to do is we need to bombard Robbie with like beer mail.
Yeah.
That'd be cool, actually.
Go for it. I won't complain. Yeah.
All right. Now, I appreciate everything that Yakima Chief are doing as far as the development side of things, and I love the fact that you've got this co-op with the farmers, which benefits everybody. I think that's an absolutely amazing thing.
Yeah.
But can you please tell me the difference between T90, T45, and Cryo?
Yes,
Because I haven't
will.
got a freaking clue.
I would endeavour to do so. So I'll try and keep it brief because I could go on for hours about this. But when you see T90 or T45, the number you're looking at there essentially refers to the amount of raw hop that is present in that final pellet. In the same way that if you had 1 kilo of leaf hops and you produce them into pellets, you're going to end up with about 90% of that weight in pellets. You'll lose about 10% of the weight through the production process. Generally, kind of some of the vegetable material and plant material is removed. Whenever you look at a recipe conversion, you always see that they say use slightly less by weight of pellets than you would whole cone. And the same goes for T45. Obviously, they're just even more concentrated. You're looking at twice as concentrated as T90 pellets. And then cryo is slightly different. So cryo is a concentrated lupulin product, as we call it. But generally speaking, T45 pellets, and as far as I know, other concentrated products are produced very similarly to how T90 pellets are produced. They are dried conventionally, they are blended and broken up into a powder, and then they are mixed and then produced into a pellet. There's lots of mechanical sifting processes which removes a lot of that vegetable material, and then it's blended back into a pellet, generally in a standardized form. T45, as far as I'm aware, kind of started in Germany. They've been around for a little while, actually. You know, if you're a big Pilsner Helles brewery in Germany, you're going to use presumably lots of German hops. Some of these German hops on a bad year could be less than 2% alpha acid. On a good year, could be more like 4 or 5. So you could end up putting twice as much in just to achieve those similar flavor profiles and bitterness profiles. So the idea is that you'd use these T45 pellets, you produce them to a known alpha acid value. So it's kind of a standardized process. You know that Augustina will use X kg of whatever hop it is to get a consistent product and a consistent character in the beer. But sort of going back to the production, they generally go through a standard production line. The temperatures aren't as cold as the ones we use, and they're pelleted generally at higher temperatures and with sort of maybe more oxygen present, which will have an impact on the final product. Where we differ is obviously cryohops. As you can imagine, there's lots of cold temperatures involved. As we said previously, their hops are frozen to approximately -30 to -40 degrees Celsius. They go and get frozen, and then they are shattered. And so all that leaf material is now very brittle, very friable, and that's separated from the lupulin, which is now, as it's an oil, as it's a resin, is sort of frozen solid by those cold temperatures, and much easier to handle. If you look at a lupulin gland close up, it's kind of a little hexagonal structure, which contains all of those essential oils and resins. That can quite easily be ruptured, which then exposes those aromatic compounds to oxygen, which can result in off flavors and undesirable flavors. By keeping them cold, those are much firmer, much safer to handle, and we can then process them more easily. So essentially, you've got a separation process between leaf material, plant material, and lupulin. And then that lupulin is then pelletized again at cold temperatures into what we've seen, what we call cryohops pellets. So in terms of differences between the two, we don't put kind of a T figure next to ours. That's not how we produce them. They're produced differently based on the variety. Every variety is different. Every variety, has different characteristics when it's pelletized, when it's produced, because they've got different oil concentrations, different alpha acid concentrations. We always try and keep at the point of pelletization everything below 27 degrees Celsius, which obviously sounds quite high, but bear in mind when those hops pass through the pellet face, the dye face on the pelletizer at high temperatures, there's lots of friction involved and it can generate high temperatures. But that's where the use of liquid nitrogen comes in. It's minimal essentially in a nutshell, it's minimal handling, lots of liquid nitrogen to keep it cold and also to minimize the ingress of oxygen as well. That's kind of the difference there.
Sorry, when you think about it, that's actually a logical way to go about it.
Mm-hmm.
If you've got a product where you have an oil or a resin or whatever you want to call it, a compound with a fairly high freezing point in the actual leaf matter, the actual leaf, so the cellulose part of it.
Yeah.
And then you've got the actual, for want of a better term, the sticky icky. We'll go with that.
Yeah.
It's nice to be able to use a physical process to separate that rather than a chemical process.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I imagine Snoop Dogg is very interested in your process. Just thinking about it logically from another standpoint.
The
way in which it's done, it's quite clever because you're utilizing a physical property rather than a chemical property for the separation process.
Yeah.
And that's always, well, number one, it's going to save you quite a lot of money. And secondly, it's going to give you a cleaner product at the end because of the separation type.
Yeah, and to add on to that, there's only one separation process as well. There's not multiple passes through these sieves, which can potentially damage the hops or again introduce oxygen. Whereas the production T45 might be multiple passes, which again could be detrimental to the quality of the hops. Quite simple.
Sorry, go on.
So quite a simple process, as you say. And most importantly to us, it's patented as well, which means obviously it's protected by us, but also we can talk a bit more freely about it. Cryohops, I think they're 5 years old this year. Not been able to speak too much about them for those reasons, but now we can be a bit more open about how we do it and why we do it, and the benefits of those as well.
Yeah, so if you had to put a T number on cryo, I'm just going to spitball it and say T90, T45, and approximately T10.
Hard to say, really hard to say, just because we might need a higher concentration of certain variety and a lower concentration of other varieties. Yeah, I wouldn't want to put a number on it. If I had to, maybe something like T30, perhaps.
Okay.
But yeah, that will change based on the variety and the requirements.
It's definitely an increment up, though, which is
I think
what
I would
isn't
say,
it?
yeah, absolutely. And if you were to compare them like to like, we try to put cryo out on its own as its own technology, its own products. But you should notice that if you ever had your hands on cryo hops, it's essentially almost like a paste that is loosely formed into a pellet, just enough to hold it into a pellet. But as soon as that pellet hits any kind of liquid, whether it's wort or finished beer, it will break apart pretty much instantly.
That sounds good to me. Sounds good to me. At this point, gentlemen, everybody looks like they have empty glasses.
Nearly.
Should we move on to a commercial break?
Not quite, but I'll be there in a minute.
Okay.
I'm going to slow coach.
Well, down in one. Off you go. I just
We have
want
been
to take
making you talk quite a bit, to be fair. So
Yeah.
it's our fault.
Yep, all good, all good.
I just want to jump in and say a quick thank you to Christian Ibbotson, who's just signed up right now to be a Patreon of the podcast. So thanks, Christian.
What a bloody legend.
Nice one, Chris.
I'll get the link out to you for the Discord server, and yeah, you can start joining us crazy boys talking about everything from kimchi to hazy pale ales. Yeah, sounds good to me.
There you go.
Let's take it to the commercial break, gents, shall we?
Let's go commercial break.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we'll just give Robbie like a little bit of a break from.
let's let
Yeah.
Robbie
basically being
catch
quizzed.
up.
No, that's what I'm here for.
Quizzed.
All good. That's what I'm here for.
I think I've learned more from listening to you talk for the last 40 minutes or so than I have from reading 3 books.
There you go.
So that's a winner as far as I'm concerned.
The Noddy series isn't going to teach you much about.
Yeah, hops for dummies.
I'm not on the Noddy series. Come on, you're giving me credit that I don't deserve.
Yeah, he's still on the picture books.
Yeah, sorry, my first reader, isn't it, Chris?
Anything more than 2 words, mate, and I'm screwed.
He's got those books where you lift the flaps.
I thought you were going to say he's got those books where you lick the flaps. I mean,
That's a different story. He was thinking Spot the Dog or something, I think, weren't you?
Yeah.
I think he was.
Who's
Chris
who's
took
going
it
first on the commercial then?
Chris took it in a weird direction as usual.
Yeah.
I haven't even poured mine yet, but I'm happy to talk about it. But
Well, mine's
who's got one beer? Who's
mine's
got
ready
beer
to go.
poured? Go on.
I'm pouring it now. I'm pouring it now.
Luke Stevens is going to be happy with mine. Let's put it that way.
So my beer, unsurprisingly, is a Track.
What a
beer.
surprise! Oh my god! No, Tricky. You haven't bought more beers from Track, have you?
Yeah, I accidentally clicked on their website.
It does happen like that, doesn't it?
It does.
Before you
accidentally found yourself on their website again, Tricky.
They keep sending me emails. It's not my fault.
Yeah.
So it's a collaboration with Verdant, and I think they actually did a sort of return trip because Track went down to Verdant and released something. Can't remember what the name of it was. Something Pie or whatever IPA, which I think it was brewed at the Verdant site, and then I think Verdant went back to the Track brewery to do this one, which is a double dry hopped IPA with Motueka, Strata, and Nelson in it at 6.5%. Now, I did actually try both of these beers yesterday, and I've got to say I was more impressed with the one that was done at the Track site than the Verdant one,
interesting.
which was a little on the green side for me. But the aroma off of this, you get it straight away as soon as it comes out the can, and it's just loads of kind of sweets, peachy, stone fruit, melon, bit of citrus kind of orange and tangerine there as well. Yeah, it's. I was going to say there's obviously like two of the hops in there are New Zealand hops, but it's definitely got more of a kind of juicy sort of stone fruit element to it than perhaps the grapey lime and gooseberry that you might normally associate with the Nelson and so on in particular. But yeah,
Bear with me, that
aroma's
was-
great.
Lively can, it's just gone all over my laptop.
Oh no. And then flavor wise,
Don't worry, Robbie. Happens to the best of us.
These things happen.
it's a little bit
welcome
different.
to podcasting.
There we go.
So there is a little bit more kind of that lime grapey element on the flavor.
Yep.
Actually, it's quite a big difference between the aroma and the flavor on this beer. A decent little bit of bitterness there. Yeah, nice soft sort of mouthfeel. The usual kind of track sort of malt bill, so it's quite a lot of sort of wheat and oats in there probably. Very drinkable, very nice. Decent beer, that.
Cheers. So I'll go next if you like. So I don't know if you
go
guys
ahead.
have ever had any beers from these guys.
That's Is it Polish?
Czech.
Czech.
So these guys are based in Prague, and they make, in my not so humble opinion, some of the best pilsners you'll ever see. Really quite bitter. Well, you can always think too bitter, but just so refreshing.
So sorry, what is the brewery, Robbie, on that one?
I'm going to attempt to say that. Vinohradsky Pivovar. So yeah, based in Prague.
And where did you source that beer?
So that's from my local bottle shop. I know the guy who owns it is a particular fan of this brewery, so I think he just buys it himself and just stocks it. So this is an IPL or India Pale Lager with Sarts, Sladek, Laurel, and Cascade. So having had their beers before, I'm expecting good things. So yeah, if you do see some of their beer, I highly recommend it for sure.
So get it cracked and tell us all about it.
Yeah.
Or are you still
going through this day? Actually,
are you still getting through that day? In which case, let's. Chris is on mute, so it's fine.
I'm not on mute anymore. I was actually offering to help the man out. I was hooking a brother up. Do you want me to jump in and do mine whilst you finish your day?
Yeah, please do. Yeah,
Okay.
I'll do mine after that, and then you can come.
All right, you jump in, Owen. It's fine.
No, you crack on, mate. I'm just saying he's got 2 reviews to finish his day of beer, and we'd like to hear about this nice, tasty IPL.
All right, I'll get back in my box. Cheers, mate. So
get out of the box.
I don't know whether or not I've reviewed this before on a podcast. I genuinely don't remember. I think I smashed this in an after party actually last time, but this is a black lager by Braybrook. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with Braybrook, they are probably one of the best lager producers in the UK. Their beers are legit, and they're also legit lagers. This is one of their black lagers. I know right now Luke Stevenson is currently having a moment, probably involving baby wipes. But this, as soon as I opened it, I smelled plum cake. Like, that smell that you get when you make I don't imagine the two on the right-hand side actually do much in the way of baking. But when you bake a plum cake, there's a very specific flavour that comes off the cake. It's really unique. And I just went, oh, that's plum cake. That smells amazing. But this is an incredibly clean beer, but with a really nice, almost, what's the best way to describe it? Like a coffee roasty kind of overtone. It's not dominating. It's just really, really nice. It's one of my favorite beers. What? Oh God. My wife. Sorry, she's being annoying. How dare she message me while I'm podcasting? But it's got this kind of coffee, almost, amber malt for those of you who brew persistently bitter, you'll know exactly what I mean. There's a specific flavour that comes off of amber malt, and it's like it's coffee and toffee, and it's dark and it's roasty, but it's not in your face. This has got that. That's what this beer has, and it is crisp and it is clean and it is a stunning beer. And if you haven't had anything by Braybrook, you really need to get some Braybrook beers ordered. Not only for that, they do amazing glassware. Well worth a visit.
Where are they based, Braybrook?
I have no clue.
They're, I think they're Leicestershire, I think, something like that. Leicestershire.
Market Harborough, possibly.
There we go.
That might be wrong. It just it came into my mind for some
I'll be
reason.
honest, somewhere south of me. But they are beautiful, absolutely amazing. Their beers are top notch.
So is it like a Schwarzbier, do you think?
It's a Schwarzbier, yeah.
It's a Schwarzbier.
Schwarzbier.
And it is clean.
Clean, yeah.
I like the
Very
way you
clean.
pronounced clean when you were describing the beer. It was good.
It's a good beer, man. You should try it.
I will. I need to get some Braybrook in my life. So I'm drinking a beer from Duration. After we ended up on the last podcast chatting to Miranda and Bates, I got stuck in, especially after they offered us the £5 discount code. So I'm drinking Bet the Farm, which is their, interestingly, this is the bottle version, which has been in their fooder. They also do a canned version, which I've tried. And interestingly, the canned version is described as a continental pale ale, and the bottle version is described as a farmhouse pale. So there's some slight differences, despite being effectively the same beer. But I think
bit more goat in the bottle, perhaps.
Yeah, so it's a very different beer, to be honest with you. The fact that it's been in the fooder with, I think, probably some other bacterias, but it's super dry. You can just smell how dry it is. So can you smell dry?
I think I know what you're getting at. Yeah,
I think you can, right? But you're kind of getting a vanilla oak vibe on the nose, and some gooseberry type, sort of slightly tart but tropical kind of notes on the nose. It's not as carbonated as I might have expected it to be. I sort of wanted it to be a little bit spritzier. It's not undercarbed, but I would have liked just a little bit more carbonation on the beer. But what comes through on the flavour is definitely that oak flavour and that vanilla flavour, and a good strong kind of malt backbone. But you don't get so much of the tropicality on the flavour. It's probably more kind of a citrus rind. But it's a really, really pleasant beer. Hats off to them. They haven't had their whole kind of fodder thing set up for very long. I think maybe they've only had one or two generations kind of cycling through it. And I think give it a couple more years, like they're one to watch in terms of their farmhouse stuff.
Yeah, I guess it'll only get more complex as
exactly
everything ages.
Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to trying it in a couple of years. I think that this maybe just lacks a tiny bit of complexity. Needs to be a little bit spritzier, but otherwise it's a really enjoyable beer. And at only 5.2%, it's very, very drinkable. So it's a good one.
Awesome.
So, Robbie, have you finished your day?
I have. I finished my day and I've started my Vinohradsky Pivovar. Having had beers from these guys before, it's kind of what I expected in terms of, it's a nice colour. It's not pin bright as you'd expect from maybe a Pilsner, but these guys are a bit more of a modern interpretation of a Pilsner style. Super clean, super dry. Again, I think I can kind of smell the dryness. As you said, so it's got two Czech hop varieties in it, Sarts and Sladek. So very traditional, very floral, quite grassy, quite herbal. Then obviously 2 American hop varieties in there as well. So Cascade, I guess we all know, super floral, some citrus in there as well. And Laurel, which has been around for a little while, but from my experience in the homebrew world, I'm not sure how many of you guys have used that before or have come across it. So it's a variety that's kind of bred from noble stock, but grown in America. So you have generally higher alpha and oil concentrations, but it's a real kind of floral bomb. Really clean, kind of classic noble characteristics, just amped up. It's a noble hop kind of grown in American environment. So yeah, I mean, this is delicious. So super clean, super floral, bit of citrus in there, but yeah, it's very dry. I imagine the finishing gravity is probably pretty low on that, but super drinkable. So yeah, I'm not sponsored by these guys, or I don't work for these guys, but if you do see some of their beer, I highly recommend it. So yeah, it's a winner for me.
Sounds great.
And IPL is kind of I know it's got lots of different names. IPL is one of my favorite styles as well, because I think I love hops, but also I love the real drinkability of a lager. I know a big heavy IPA can sometimes get a bit cloying, a bit heavy, but I do love hops and hop flavor, hop aroma. So to combine those, I think it's an underrepresented style for sure.
It's nice to see one that's leaning into the sort of noble hops or the American style noble hops as well.
Yeah, for sure. More, yeah,
which is cool.
Nice. That sounds really good. I'm going to keep my eye out for that brewery next time I'm in some sort of bottle shop.
Yep.
Although I might be that might be slightly wishful thinking, because it sounds like a pretty niche import.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much has made it into the UK, but I guess keep your eyes peeled.
Yeah, I will. So you mentioned that you've been homebrewing for a good long while now. What's that? 8 years you mentioned.
Yes.
So what's on your what's your current beers on tap?
Nothing at the moment, actually. I'm kind of between homes, as you can imagine. So I'm not really got the space for homebrew set up at the moment. I do have a few bottles left of an Imperial Stout I brewed about 3 years ago, which, as I'm sure you guys can relate to, I wish I'd kept more, because now it's really nice. And I drank it all when it was 2 months old and hadn't really got into its stride. I guess I did. I've got 2 friends who work for a great restaurant in Birmingham, and we made some elderflower wine on Monday, actually. So I've got some of that bubbling away in the kitchen. That's a couple of demijohns is about all I've got space for at the moment, rather than the full rig. So, but hoping once into my new place, I'll be able to spread myself out a bit more and dust off the kit and get stuck into it again.
So did you get into home brewing after starting to work in the hop industry, or was that already
other way around, actually? Yeah. So 2014 was kind of I just sort of graduated university in 2013, and I just really got into sort of hoppy beer and craft beer in general, and we sort of was really taken by it, and regretted all those years I'd spent drinking Bud Light and Desperados on nights out. But I had my first Jaipur, my first Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. I was like, wow, this is what beer's, I guess, meant to be like, I guess. And then thought I'd give it a go. So bought an old cool box and a big stovetop. I was still living at home with my parents at the time, so boiled over 30 litres of wort on the family kitchen stovetop, which
that is a rite of passage.
I was about to say that, mother was delighted with that. Cooling down fermenters in the bathtub, as we've all done, I'm sure, before we had fermentation fridges. The first couple of beers were shocking, as you can imagine, but then actually got into it a bit and started doing a bit more research and actually trying to learn the science behind it before just diving headfirst in, and actually churned out a couple of good beers. I was working at a pub at the time, and then a job came up with a local hop merchant, the guys at Charles Farram, and applied for that as a sales advisor, and cut to 6 years later, here we are. So I don't think I'd be working in the industry I'm in now if it wasn't for homebrewing. So yeah, it really gave me that sort of boost into it.
Talk to us a bit about a couple of one or two your go-to recipes, Robbie.
So I know when we sort of prepped for this, you sort of mentioned what's my favourite beer style. I'm Team West Coast. Not that you have to choose, but if I had to,
tricky happy then.
but if I had to, I love a beer that's got a real nice bitterness to it. I think that's kind of, keeps you going back for more and keeps you refreshed, keeps your sort of palate challenged. So I love some of the new hops we've got coming up, but I'm quite old school, and I think something like a Chinook Centennial Simcoe West Coast IPA is hard to beat. I think, mostly pale malt, a little bit of crystal malt, a little bit of wheat or something, just for a bit of body. Clean ale yeast, quite a low fermentation temperature, not too crazy on the dry hop. I think can't go wrong really. That's sort of my go-to, I would say. And I find it's a really rewarding style to brew because you've got, I guess, the challenge of getting a nice clear beer as well. I guess it's a bit more of a balanced beer than something like a New England IPA. As much as I love New England IPAs, they're hop juice, aren't they? The malt character is kind of, I guess, secondary, whereas West Coast has got a real nice balance between malt and hop character. So yeah, that'll be my go-to. But I'd love. I've got like a nice sort of house recipe for a great 4.2% sort of best bitter, because again, one of those served through a hand pull is again hard to beat. So
the classic styles. You're getting some love from the West Coast.
There we go.
Jay Fork, who is one of our regulars who listens regularly and has literally just clicked the subscribe button on Patreon. So thanks, Jay Fork.
Whoop.
He is currently saying that he is your brother from another mother. And I have to say that that other mother is in a completely different country because he's Swedish or Norwegian or Danish. Or he's Scandinavian of some random version.
He's well travelled.
I think
they're all the same.
I think
they're all the same.
He Dutch? Is he Dutch?
Dutch, he's Dutch. Okay, we'll go with Dutch. I know he's not, but yeah.
No, he's Danish.
He's
Danish.
about to unsubscribe.
He is
Patreon.
Danish. I know he's
definitely
Danish. I know he's Danish. But yeah, so Jay Fox giving you some love, and I know Tricky and Owen are both massive fans of the West Coast. I'm a big fan of like a best bitter, so I will send you a recipe for a best bitter,
awesome.
which is my best bitter, and it's a little bit different, but if you give it time, it's a really, really nice beer. Would you say? I mean, obviously West Coast is probably your go-to style. Is that your favorite style to drink?
It changes. Again, I hope none of my colleagues end up seeing this, but I'm quite. We're very fortunate that we work with a lot of the greatest hop forward brewers in the world and brewers in general. So we have access to lots of amazing beer and lots of great hoppy beer. I'm a big fan of a Pilsner or even a pint of Guinness. Something that's really straightforward, not too challenging on the palate. Something you can just sit and drink as you're talking nonsense with your friends in a pub. I'm known as the beer sniffer amongst my friends, some of whom like craft beer and hoppy beer, some of whom life doesn't get better than carling. I don't judge, but
I will.
Yeah. But I'm there, just sniffing a beer, and they're like, just drink it, you idiot. But yeah, my go-to would probably be something like something like a Pilsner or a Keller, something like that on draft. It's hard to beat something like that. If I see that in a bar, I'm going to order one. So yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to beat a good lager, especially especially a beer garden, right? Like a hot day beer garden.
Absolutely. But then again, if I see something like a Fine Ales Jarl or an Oakham Citra on cask, again, that's getting ordered, probably followed by many more, because it's just well balanced, easy drinking beer that is delicious but without being too challenging, I guess.
Yeah.
Nobody wants a beer they have to chew. You don't want it on a session, do you?
Yeah, absolutely.
No, I think you've just ticked the boxes for almost every single one of our regulars and most of our listeners there.
Good.
And just from a homebrew perspective, have you tried brewing a lager yet?
Yeah, and it went terribly wrong. I think I got the carbonation terribly wrong on it, and I just couldn't fix it. I did brew just before lockdown kicked in. Actually, when I still had access to some homebrew kit, I brewed a Kolsch, which is probably the most rewarding beer I've brewed, in that it tasted exactly how I hoped it would when I put the recipe together. In terms of bitterness, malt character, it looked the way I would. It wasn't pin bright, but it had a nice, just slight haze to it. And it was absolutely delicious, and I'd like to brew that again. That's probably the beer I've been most happy with. Probably not the most exciting beer, but in terms of, these are the hardest beers to get right, I guess.
Well, when we were talking to Bates from Duration last week, he said the same thing to me, because I used to work in a brewery. I was a brewer at a brewery for a while,
Okay.
and the single hardest beer to brew well is the beer where there's nothing to hide behind.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
That's always a lager.
Mm-hmm.
Always. And if you can brew a good lager that tastes good, you're on an absolute winner.
Yeah,
like an award-winning lager.
I mean, we know
like a gold
people,
medal lager.
We know a couple of people
like a gold medal Munich Haus.
Yeah, I mean, we know a couple of people who've got those, don't we?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
No idea who they are. So yeah, that's cool. So that was a little bit about you. That was the personal aspect. We're going in for that one. Now, I think we're going to drop balls deep into this one. We're going to ask you to give up company secrets. So, what research have Yakima Chief been doing, or what do they have planned specifically that's going to hit the homebrew market probably within the next 12 months? What can you actually share with us that's going to get us all juiced up and ready to rock and roll?
So we've it has popped up on camera very briefly. I know Richard had a copy. So this, I think, is applicable to both the homebrewing community and the commercial brewing community, and it's a way of looking at recipe design, about where to use certain hops, where certain hops work best. And so, in a nutshell, the survivable compounds, as we call it, are those 7 compounds. There's over 1,000 compounds in hops, and counting. Some are super volatile and don't even get anywhere near to being present in the final beer. Some are much more soluble, much more survivable, and actually quite present in the beer in large quantities. So we identified 7, and I will attempt to read them out to you, but I'm probably going to trip over my words.
Is this myrcene and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, so you've got geraniol and linalool, which are probably the most common ones, maybe the ones you're most familiar with. They're in hops in large quantities, and those are quite floral, quite citrusy, and those are just general hop oils. And then you look at things like thiols and esters and things like that, which perhaps aren't as soluble, maybe a bit more volatile, but they present wacky flavors such as grapefruit, papaya, gummy bears, all these sort of weird and wonderful things. So obviously hops have different quantities of these. And again, I'll point you back towards the Cryohops blend website. We've got this, what we call our survivals graph. I'm not sure if you see that. Essentially, it's got a list of not every hop variety, but pretty much every variety that's in our portfolio, all US hops, sort of how much they've got of those and in which proportion. And it's sort of it's a way of looking at where these hops are best utilized. So if you've got a hop that's really high in survivable compounds, you can use that earlier on in the brewing process, because it's got a higher quantity, so there's more there to survive through to the final beer. If you've got something like Cascade, which has got a lower proportion of these compounds, if you use that in the boil, by the time you get to the finished beer, a lot of that's probably going to be lost or boiled away, or it's been lost during fermentation, or even just the application of CO2 during carbonation can scrub some of those compounds away. And the key thing here is this graph isn't a good or bad. It's not saying the hop at this end is good and that one's bad. It's just where best to use them. Key thing here is that when we say early on in the brewing process, we're talking late kettle onwards. We're not talking 60-minute boil, because anything you boil for 60 minutes, there's going to not be a lot left apart from alpha acids, bitterness. And whereas later on in the brewing process, we're talking post-fermentation. So there's no real stress from fermentation or anything like that. So it's about finding hops that complement each other, and it's about finding hops that you can load into your wort stream and your beer stream to give them the best possible chance of surviving kind of the stress of the brewing process, I guess. Because, if you're boiling those hops, or you're fermenting those hops, or you're, pumping CO2 into those hops, it's going to have an effect. So you want to give get as many of those compounds in as possible and give as many of them, the best chance of surviving. And that's kind of culminated in what we call our Cryopop original blend, which is that secret blend of herbs and spices that I can't tell you about. So, yeah.
What I found most interesting about that graph, Robbie, was that Centennial was like just off the chart sort of thing at one end of the scale. But then you've got Cascade at the opposite end. And a lot of people would think, those two hops would be very close together in terms of, sort of character and I guess heritage as well to an extent. And yet there seems to be this massive difference in terms of the actual composition of, these are compounds that are going to be within the oils and stuff in the hop, aren't they? I guess so. What's going on there? Is that just?
So the important thing, I guess, to look at with Centennial. Centennial is a great hop. We all love Centennial, right? I don't know if you'll be able to see it through my camera, but you look at Centennial, that white or creamy color there is kind of the dominant thing. So you've got what is a great hop, but in terms of those spiral compounds, it's relatively one-dimensional. Whereas you compare it to something like Idaho 7, which is this one here, there's a good mix of all of those, and you've got a good balance and a good composition. Centennial's at the top end, but again, the bulk of that is made up with one compound. I think everyone was as surprised as you guys were when the results first came out, and it was like, Centennial, really? But the compound that it's high in is what we call methylgeronate, which is a compound which presents as really floral, high floral, and Centennial is known for being super floral, right? So it was a surprise, but also not so much of a surprise, I guess, to see that. So again, that just shows that, all these new hops coming out, but some of the old ones still have value and still pack a punch, right? So, but yeah, it does stand literally head and shoulders above some of the others there.
And I guess that points out that it's useful to use, but you would not want to use it solely on its own, unless you were looking for a very floral type.
Yeah, and actually,
strong floral aroma. Combine them with some others.
For sure, I don't know if we can get maybe a link in any of the chats, but we've got the page 3 here, which talks about blending hops, which identifies that. You've got the example on the right-hand side here. You've got two hops, which are Laurel and Crystal, which have very similar profiles. So you wouldn't want to brew a beer with Laurel and Crystal. It's not going to be a bad beer, but it's going to be, you're using two hops there that are quite similar in characteristics. Whereas we recommend here use something like Laurel and Talus, because they've got different proportions. You're going to end up with a beer that's more interesting, more complex, a wider range of flavors and aromas. So that's another way of, looking at which hops pair better with one another, pair best with one another, in order to get, a greater palette of flavors, I guess, and aromas. So
and I think it's probably easy to perhaps take that information that you just shared for granted in terms of being able to see a graphical understanding of how hops might present themselves within a beer. Because, you look at a graph and think, oh, well, that's interesting. But enormous amount of research has gone into being able to present that information. A lot of time, obviously, a lot of money's been spent. Sort of the equipment we've invested in, all this research is done in house, which I think is really cool to say. We've got the technology, but also the staff who are capable of performance research. Which we're really proud to say. And there's many customers who have taken this on board, printed that off, stuck it in their brewery office or on their brewery wall, and it's changed the way they design their recipes. They're not subbing hops out, but there's a guy maybe using Cascade, boiling it for 10 minutes and gone, actually, I'm probably not getting the best out of the Cascade, right? I can still use Cascade. I still get some Cascade character. Maybe I'll dry hop with it post-fermentation, or, use it later on. There's a customer of ours in Ireland who has been doing similar research by himself, and this came out sort of at the same time. He was like, this is amazing. This is really going to change sort of how we get the best out of the hops we use. They weren't brewing bad beer by any means. They're brewing great beer. But it kind of, are you leaving something on the table by using a hop in the wrong place? Are you not getting the best out of that hop? So, really cool stuff. And it's obviously the great thing is it applies to, commercial brewing, but also home brewing as well. You guys can just use this as well as some commercial brewers.
I think
Yeah,
Chris
I'm
needs to get a copy of
checking
this booklet because there's a whole list of scientific equipment that I know he would get excited just reading the list of at the back.
Yeah,
there.
it doesn't mean as much to me as it might to Chris, but we talk about, what we're talking about, like GC, QT, OF. I'm not sure if that means anything to you, but yeah, Chris likes it. So
I like GC. I'll be
Yeah.
honest, gas chromatography is one of the most underrated parts of analytical chemistry. It's really nice.
so there you go. I think
Just-
as far as I can tell, we can
nod,
just
nod, Robbie. Pretend
Yeah.
like you understand. That's what we're
Yeah,
doing.
The thing about gas chromatography is it tends to deal with volatile compounds, which is why it's
Yeah.
applicable to this.
Yeah.
I absolutely adore it. I love GC. I've played with GCMS, GCMSMS, Time of Flight, all that kind of thing. Flame, I've played with all of them, and they are wonderful. They're really nice. We've actually just had a question from the fourth member of the Hop Edition team, the Scotsman Andy Lynch, who said, "Is that book available online?"
yeah, there's a PDF of that. I don't know if we can. Can I drop that in the
I'll
chat
share a link.
somehow? Or yeah,
What was?
If you pop it in the chat on here, Robbie, and then we'll drop it into the chat for the YouTube and Facebook
absolutely.
groups.
Give me just a second, and I'll pull it up for you.
Oh, wait there. One of our regulars, Oshin, has just linked it. It's cryopopblend.com, and it's on there, and it is the Survivable Compounds Handbook.pdf.
There it is. Yeah, I've just dropped in the chat as well. But perfect. Well done. Nice
Yeah, Oshin,
Right.
you can always trust an anaesthetist to come up with the pertinent information, can't you? Thanks,
Awesome.
thanks, Oshin. You're doing well there, mate. Cheers, bud.
We'll
Yeah,
just
thanks,
we'll just post it again, just in case anyone's struggling to find that. So
Oshin gets
Cheers,
a
Robbie.
Patreon discount.
Well, Oshin's going to get a T-shirt for that. I'm going to send him a T-shirt.
Cool. So, Robbie,
Yes.
does Yakima Chief still sell leaf hops, and why do people still buy leaf hops?
So leaf hops, yeah, really interesting. Apart from so you guys may or may know this, probably the biggest leaf hop user in the world is Sierra Nevada. They use pretty much solely leaf, which, as you can imagine, is a lot of leaf. Leaf is pretty much unique to the UK, and we're pretty much the only nation left in the world where a lot of brewers still use leaf. Reasons why that is, I guess, tradition. Probably a big one is equipment. Leaf is generally easier to process through older brewhouse equipment. If any of you have ever had pumps blocked with pellets or heat exchangers blocked with pellets, then you've lived that life, you've lived that pain. So what we do see is if a craft brewery customer opens up or orders a new brew house, I would say 99 times out of 100, that brew house will be configured to use pellets. So I'd say probably the biggest reason is tradition. In a nutshell, it's what's always been used, and leaf hops are great. But yeah, the UK is kind of unique in the fact that we're the country that uses the most of those. We've got customers throughout the continent. There's a few customers in France who use leaf hops, but generally that's about it. The vast, almost all of what we do is pellets or cryo hop pellets.
Do Sierra Nevada source their leaf hops from you guys, or do they have their own specific suppliers?
Oh, you're going to say something there, Chris? Or
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
I just need to bob outside the door because my hedgehogs are back.
okay.
For those of you who are regular listeners to the podcast, my hedgehogs are currently banging on the lawn, so I'm just going to go and move them on a little bit. I'll be back.
Right,
Yeah,
didn't think he was going to say that.
Yeah, he has some sexy hedgehogs.
Some squatters.
Yeah, slightly weird sort of little segment of the podcast.
It's a recurring feature actually on the pod.
That's a nice one. Yeah, excellent.
Thankfully, like the microphone's not good enough to pick it up, but yeah, I reckon we need Chris to like really nail his David Attenborough impression.
Yeah, do a full feature. Yeah, take the camera out and
be perfect.
Yeah,
great. So leaf hops, so tradition predominantly. Then
I would say so. Yeah, there's I think for maybe it goes hand in hand with cask beer, and in cask beer you typically have perhaps more softer, rounded flavour profiles. the reason you probably wouldn't put a 7% West Coast IPA in cask. I would say it's probably not the beer style that's meant for that package format. You'd tend to get probably a different flavour from leaf hops slightly, and maybe with slightly more rounded vegetable character or leaf character in there. I believe we do work with the likes of Sierra Nevada, people like that. I know for a lot of the big American craft breweries have good relationships with like individual farms and things like that. So I think we work with them to some degree. Those guys are quite unique. And if you ever, they've got 2 facilities, one out in the West Coast in Chico, and then they've got one in Mills River, which is just north of Asheville in North Carolina. Asheville's a great beer city if ever you fortunate to get out to North Carolina, but they've got the most unbelievable brew house out there. Big classic copper vessels and wood and marble lined brew house. It's a real sort of cathedral of brewing. So those guys do it right.
Yeah, well, maybe if Yakima Chief want to sponsor the podcast, become a Patreon, maybe we could get there, Robbie.
Maybe, maybe.
I
mean, I've not been there yet, so
just for them.
Well, we'll do some video for you, Robbie. So
that's very kind of you. Yeah,
I know.
We actually have an amazing videographer on staff.
Okay,
we do. Yeah,
I'll bear that all that in mind. Yeah,
maybe like a collab trip, Robbie. Get on board.
Okay, all right.
Sell this to your marketing team.
Yeah,
let us know how you get on.
Yeah, send me a full proposal and we'll take it.
I'll write you the business case.
Perfect.
Done.
I'm so glad we've got Owen on staff.
Give me your email address. The business case is done.
No, this is quality. I'm absolutely loving this because it's a mixture of beer and geek. So I'm happy with beer and geek.
Yeah.
Isn't that the whole concept for the podcast? Just generally,
pretty much.
Yeah. Geek, yeah.
We're going for the 4 blokes sitting in a pub, beering out and geeking out, and I think we're hitting it. So one thing that I do want to ask is, and again, this comes down to you possibly giving up company secrets. Are there any interesting new hops or products that you may be able to tell us about?
Yes, there's some stuff we could go through. Yeah, so I know you mentioned HBC 630, Chris, or maybe someone in the chat mentioned it. A hop we're all really excited about is HBC 586. It's again, many of these experimental hops have probably been in development for upwards of 5, maybe 10 years. We want to make sure they're right. One fact I always love telling people, and they might all know it, Citra was first identified in sort of the late 80s, early 90s, the original plant for Citra. It was released formally, I think, in 2007. It was named. That thing was planned for release over decades. Really, it was released when it was felt the time was right and the market was ready for it. Same with Sabro. Someone using Sabro maybe 2005. I can't imagine what the reaction would have been, but it still blows people's minds now. So we kind of got to try and be ahead of the curve, I guess, and try and predict where the market's going. But HBC 586, a hop flavour that's often associated to hops, but actually I find is quite hard to capture, is mango. Mango is actually quite a complex flavour, and you think of mango as maybe like a mango sorbet, but actually the real mango flavour is quite fleshy, quite citric, almost quite earthy. But HBC 586, I described it as, or a lot of people describe it as, if you're familiar with a mango solero. It's that kind of mango sorbet, kind of almost creamy vanilla character as well.
Can I take a guess?
Go for
it. Can I say it's some sort of hybrid between Sabro, Talus, and possibly Eldorado?
I don't think so. No, I don't know. I don't know the lineage. I think it's so you've got with hops, you've got in our portfolio, you've got Humulus lupulus, which is kind of the conventional hop, sort of the hop everyone knows, and then you've got a different subspecies, which is Humulus neomexicanus, which is a separate strain of hops, which was found to been growing wild in New Mexico for about 100 million years, something like that. And those are the likes.
Fairly young then, really.
That's
Talus,
isn't it? Talus
so Talus and Sabro. So Talus is a daughter plant of Sabro. So that's why you find with Talus and Sabro, they've got that real kind of wacky flavour and aroma, and it really quite divisive, I guess. But that kind of sweet shot, candied fruit, unlike anything you've ever smelt before. It's really hard to kind of actually pin down those flavors. As far as I'm aware, 586 is from the more conventional family tree, but it's got that real clean mango character, and everyone who's sampled it or has brewed with it has absolutely adored it. So look out for that one. Yeah, we'd like to have that available to the homebrew market as well. I'm sure we could do something this year on that.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay,
If you need anyone to test it, my door's open.
Fire it over, mate. We'll all knock that one out for you. We'll send you homebrew with it in.
We have this occasional feature called the hop tester thing.
Oh, so, yes, we do.
That's definitely somewhere where that could be applied.
I've got to be honest with you, Robbie. It is hilarious.
Oh yeah, I happen to brew those beers usually, so just coincidentally.
It's such a funny segment because you start off drinking the beer and you're like, I've got no idea. And then you drink more and more, and eventually your palate acclimatizes and you start to identify things. And
so you guys have got to try and guess the hop, right? Have you?
Yeah.
So what normally happens, obviously, if I've brewed it, I'll send it out to them as a kind of blind tasting thing, and then we'll do it on a podcast like this. And obviously, I'll be sitting here sort of like, while these guys are trying to work out what's going on, and sometimes the people get the same flavors, and it's all very similar. People's impression of the hop. Sometimes it's completely all over the place, and there's people are calling out sort of radically different sort of aromas and flavors. So it's quite interesting.
I think there tends to be quite a lot of like suggestive. You sometimes get this when people drink beer together, don't they? Drink the same beer and they go, "Oh, I'm picking up pineapple," and everyone goes, "Oh yeah, I'm picking up pineapple."
Once somebody says one thing, then it kind of pulls.
Whenever we sample hops, we do it in silence because it only takes one guy to go, that's raspberry, and everyone goes, "Oh yeah, you're dead right." So we always sample hops in silence until everyone's had a good go, and then we share our thoughts.
I think that's sensible, right? Suggestive power is quite.
It's huge with like sensory stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
The last one that we had was hilarious with the most hop with the strawberry flavor.
Yeah,
my God, that was just insane. As soon as I think it was Andy Lynch who went, "I'm getting strawberry," I'm like, "It's strawberry!"
Yeah, we all picked up strawberry quite quickly, didn't we? But then it comes down to like trying to guess where the hop came from. And then what the hop actually is, and like Tricky's like, "Oh, I've found some really niche Slovenian hop called Must," and you're like, "Well, thanks for that. I've never heard that hop, but that
was a good one though. That was
tricky. Is tricky when it comes to the hop.
He's tricky on many different levels.
Yeah, just coming back to the sensory thing, I went down to Munton's Maltings a few weeks ago to do a little tour there, and their innovation centre, they have a sensory tasting room. They've actually got it set up with like little kind of booths that you'll sit in to do the tasting, but they also have lighting control as well, so they'll actually put like I think it was like a red light or something on, so you can't tell what colour the beer is either, so you're completely sort of blind and audio. So so you have a similar sort of thing?
So we've got a place, it's called the Aroma Dome. Is our
Aroma Dome, love it.
Is our sensory facility, and you're dead right. The hops are put into kind of a reddy brown glass jar. Obviously, if you see a hop that's maybe a bit browner in color or maybe a bit yellow, you're gonna prejudge, I guess. It's done under red light, just so the color can't influence the sensory aspect. So similar process.
Do they blindfold you and make you wear like, earphones?
No, I think we're all good in that sense. Yeah. I've not done it. I've not done it out there yet, but I think they're allowed to see.
It's quite insane.
So it's like kill off all the other senses to sort of just try and really emphasize the olfactory and
That's pretty cool. I mean, weirdly enough, we have a beer club at work. It's been dormant for a while since we got Ofsted and stuff, but in the room where we normally do the beer club, we actually have a dark room which has got red light in it.
Okay.
So I think next time we have a beer session, I may suggest that everybody whips into the dark room one at a time and just kind of taste the beer in there before they come out. That might be quite interesting, really.
That's serious, yeah. That's serious.
We're all scientists. It's at the back of one of the physics classrooms.
Okay.
That could be quite cool.
Yeah, it's a good way. Yeah, whenever you do beer tasting or beer judging or anything like that, you can always be so influenced by the appearance.
Yeah, I mean, you should see my Kolsch. That'd influence you.
It's a bit like the whole triangle tests and doing it in opaque cups and trying not to kind of influence the visual. As they say, you kind of eat with your eyes first, don't you? So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
No, that's very cool. Are we all out of questions? I think Robbie's probably
we have one more.
Razzled for best part of an hour and 3/4 now. So
we have one more question, Robbie. Aside from world domination, what plans do Yakima have for the UK market?
Well, I mean, without getting too corporate, I mean, it's all about what we do is connecting brewers and homebrewers to the family hop farms, really. So, just expanding our reach, and that's kind of why we were brought on. That's why we launched the homebrew program in general, whereas previously the hops were going through resellers and distributors and being repackaged and all these things. That's why we want to give you guys access to the best quality hops, and you can be using the same lots of Citra, Mosaic, and Simcoe that the Deas, Verdants, and all the monks of this world are using, which I think is a really cool thing to offer, and just I guess be present. Part of my role is to be kind of do things like this and chat with you guys and tell you all about YCH, and not just be there to make a sale and collect a check. It's all about building a community, which I think is really important, and collaborating on podcasts or brew days or YouTube videos or whatever it might be. So yeah, we always want to add value and see value in everything we do. And that's sort of at the heart of what we do. So getting our hops out to homebrewers across Europe, bringing on more customers generally. Stuff like that.
So where should people go if they want to get access to those sort of direct from the Chief Hops?
Yes, at the moment we're working with the guys down in Aldershot, the homebrew shop. There are plans afoot to launch a web shop, by the end of the year. These things do take some time. It's obviously there's some cross-border issues to contend with. Our European entity is based in Belgium, just south of Brussels. So there's some trade issues to contend with. We won't get into that, obviously. But we'd love the chance to offer these hops to you directly. But at the same time, we want to work with retailers and partners who share our values, do what we do. So at the moment, we've got some of our hops in stock at the homebrew shop down in Farnborough, who really keen to source our hops and work with us on those. And we'll continue to sort of be present in the market and be here to see what you guys are up to and work with you guys.
Well, to be honest with you, mate, if you stick around, if you were willing to come back on in a few months and keep us apprised of what it is that you guys are actually doing, I know for a fact that I've used Yakima hops quite a few occasions, and I've been stunned by the level of quality. I do think they're incredibly good hops, and I think that your transport chain, your distribution, and everything that goes along with it is clearly working. So for me, purely from a science standpoint, Cryohops blew my mind. But I think you're clearly doing something very, very right, and as such, I think it's a very positive thing for the homebrewing community and the brewing community as a whole.
I mean, just to add on to that, if I may, a number of our biggest and most influential customers across the globe, but in Europe as well, were homebrewers. You look at the likes of Verdant Brewing. Not so long ago, less than 10 years ago, those guys were brewing 100-litre batches in a shipping container. And if you guys have been fortunate enough to travel to Falmouth and see the brewery now, it's insane. And homebrewers, I think, are some of the most passionate and dedicated brewers, full stop. And you absolutely deserve access to the same quality hops that these these big guys are using. So that's what we're here to offer and here to facilitate. And quality is at the heart of everything we do. So that's another reason why we've taken the decision to start offering our hops directly in homebrew form. So yeah, I'm positive that anyone who uses our hops will see the difference and see the value in using them for sure.
Speaking as a web developer as well, the whole sort of setting up a web shop, it's like 15 minutes. So whoever's lied and told you it takes a while, it's 15 minutes.
Right, gotcha.
If you guys are doing direct to the customer hops, then, sign me up. I'll be there.
Yeah. But that is coming, yeah. So I'd ask for a little bit of patience on that from everyone. But yeah, that's what we want to do alongside working with some valuable retail partners as well. So
yeah, just don't give your email address out to people. Otherwise, every day you'll be getting bombarded. So
there is a homebrew.eu@yakimachief.com is the general homebrew one. So any questions? There's a couple of us who field those emails. We're happy to answer any inquiries you might have.
Super.
Are you guys going to be out at any events as well this year? So I assume kind of like BrewCon and things like that. You might.
Yeah, I met with, if anyone knows Simon, the guy who looks after
Yeah.
BrewCon. I met with him at an event in London a couple of weeks ago. He's hyped for BrewCon this year. The first true post-COVID BrewCon. So he's got big plans for that. I won't jump the gun, but I think he said maybe around the end of September he's looking at doing that. So we'll absolutely be there. We had, even though it was obviously not ideal circumstances last year, we sort of launched the hops that event and it was a great success. Anyone who was there, it was good fun. So yeah, we're certainly going to be there again.
Awesome.
There's a few other things going on in sort of homebrew community in the UK that I'm going to tease you with that could be really exciting, but I can't say any more than that because it's not my place to say. But we've been approached by a couple of people, so yeah, watch this space.
Oh no, I was muted. Can you hint? Can you give us a vague possibility?
No.
Could you sign it? Can we play charades?
I wouldn't even know how to do it. Wouldn't even know how to do it.
Tease, Robbie.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Right,
But,
in 6 months you're coming back and you're giving us details. It's as simple as
Yeah,
that.
you should have more info by then for sure. But there's a meeting next week actually, so we'll see how we go.
Well, we'd love to have you back, Robbie. It's been a pleasure chatting to you.
No, I'd love to be back. It was good fun. Thank you for having me.
I've really enjoyed
Robbie.
this.
Yeah.
It's just geek. It's geek.
It's
I love
geek whilst drinking beer, which is, I think everyone's happy place right now.
Okay,
absolutely.
just to fill Robbie in, after the podcast, we have like an after party where we'll get a lot of the regulars will join us on this particular video chat.
Yep.
Are you willing to stick around for a few minutes and maybe answer a few more questions?
Absolutely, yeah. I've got a couple of beers left, so yeah, let's.
You've not got
go for it.
kids, you've not got anything like that you've got to get off to?
Absolutely not, no.
Okay,
No, good.
right. In
You can
that
have a
case,
lion. You're fine. You can sleep off the beer. It's all good.
in that case, should we call an end to it there, gentlemen?
Yeah,
I think
let's
it's a good idea.
let's finish that one off now then. So
That is one of the most interesting podcasts that we've done for a very long time from my standpoint as a geek.
That's good.
So, Robbie, thank you very much for joining us. I've really appreciated it, and I found it
most
very,
welcome.
very informative.
No, thanks for having me. Thanks for inviting me.
No, you're more than welcome, mate. So that
lots of
is
people
it.
saying thanks in the chat as well. So yeah, I think lots of the listeners enjoyed that one too. So
Good stuff.
yeah.
Good stuff.
And most of them are going to be joining us in the after party. So thank you very much for listening to the Hop Edition, episode 46. Thank you very much to Brewcake Tap for being our sponsor. If you want to sign up for our homebrew competition, thacomps.uk. Entries are coming in literally thick and fast. While I've been sitting here, this phone has not stopped. But oh, there we go. It's buzzing again. We're getting entries in.
Robbie's doing a little bit of sponsorship for that competition
definitely
as well.
is.
So there'll be a few Yakima Chief Hop samples going into the prize pool.
Quite possibly.
Maybe
Yes,
some
we
630.
have already thanked Robbie, which is good. So thanks for sponsoring that, Robbie. Really appreciate it.
We do appreciate your assistance with that very much.
Just to reinforce that point, obviously registration is open, has been for a number of weeks for the competition, and the window for entries is now open as of 5 o'clock this afternoon. So if you haven't registered, get down to thacomps.uk and get stuck in. And we'd love to taste your beer.
And
Yeah,
Robbie, if you
definitely.
fancy joining us to do a bit of judging on the 29th, feel free to pop down to Unity Brewing and
That
stuff,
would
right?
be very cool if you could do that. Are you available on the 29th of July, Robbie?
Good question. I can certainly check my diary and we'll have a look. Yeah,
I think
Because-
that definitely constitutes a work-based field trip.
Put it on expenses.
I know it's most definitely work. So yeah, that's
Definitely work.
We'll
Yeah,
be
there
down
you
in
go.
Unity on the 29th. We'll be trying all of these amazing beers that people are sending to us. So if you want to come down and help us out, that would be amazing.
Drop me a message, Robbie, if you
Perfect.
can make it.
See, 29th. Yep. I'll be there.
29th of July. Yep.
Awesome.
So episode 46 in the bag, people. Thank you very much for listening to the Hop Edition. Thank you to our sponsors. Thank you to Robbie for joining us and being awesome and giving us those tidbits of information that we really needed. We're going to wrap this one up. I'm going to put the links for the after party into the chat and stuff. But other than that, gentlemen, thank you very much. This has been amazing.
Thank you very much.
Thanks all.
Cheers, everyone. Bye-bye.
Night.
Bye.
There we go.
Right then, let's get this chat message into the chat. So YouTube, there you go. And I'm going to stick the password in because I can't actually remember the password. Oh no, that's wrong. So YouTube, that is the password for the chat. Feel free to join us for the after party. We're gonna close off the. We're gonna close it all off pretty much now. I'm gonna stop the live stream. You've got the password. You've got the other bits in there. For anybody who's listening on Facebook, jump onto YouTube right now. Grab the link and grab the password. Other than that, thanks YouTube. We love you, and thanks Facebook. We kind of love you too.
Bye.
Bye.